Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goosejunkies. Today we are on episode 10, and we have a special guest with us, Monster Blood, over at his channel, Monster Blood. Thank you for coming on tonight, Austin. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Ready to talk about some werewolves.
I know that's why we invited you on because we did the werewolf review-a-thon a long time ago, and you're a massive werewolf guy like myself and
Oh yeah.
like BD, and we are excited to talk about this because this is one of my favorite Goosebumps books of all time. We're going to talk about Werewolf Skin from Goosebumps, and we're going to pair it against Nightmare Inn from The Haunting Hour, and we're going to see which one stacks up better. And like per usual, we have our two normal guests that are always on. We're not really guests, but panelists. We have BD Horror and Minnesota Goosebumps fan. How are y'all doing tonight?
Yo, yo, what's up, people of the night? It's your boy, BD Horror, and today we're talking about werewolves. Obviously, I got ripped off because Ezekiel tried to sell me a copy of a first edition Werewolf Skin, and all I got was Your Mama's a Werewolf by Shivers. So I'm about to shoot him with the silver bullet next time I see him. But yeah, aside from that, doing well tonight. Hope you guys enjoy this. None of you transform if there's a full moon out. Or at least hit that like button before you do.
And what about you, Minnesota?
What is up, everybody? This is very, very exciting to do with Monster Blood. Big fan of your channel. Keep going strong. Really love all the videos lately. I am extremely, extremely excited to talk about tonight's stuff because, let me tell you, one book is fantastic and one book is so bad and boring that it's going to be such an awesome flip-flop between episodes and books here, and it's a never-ending paradox of werewolf stories out there. So let's see how the Haunting Hour and Goosebumps will do their fair shot at trying to create an awesome werewolf story. I think that they are both good and bad in their own ways. What do you think, completionist?
Well, I think Goosebumps has so many werewolf stories that we're going to have so much content to carry over for many episodes moving forward if we really wanted to. Um, but for tonight's episode, um, unfortunately, we could not have Spongy 444, Goosebumps for Dummies, or Ultimate Goosebumps Man. They all couldn't make it for various reasons, but like usual, we're going to post the information to everyone's channel down in the description and in the comment section for you all to check out. Now, to answer your question, Bruce, I'm glad we're starting with werewolf skins, so we can start from the peak and work our way down the mountain a little bit, and go on this ride of R.L. Stine writing werewolf stories. And I guess I'll start off with Werewolf Skin. My journey with this book, okay, when I was a kid, I was a die-hard Fever Swamp fan because Fever Swamp was my first book. And I was stubborn as a mule. I used to think that Werewolf Skin could not hack anything compared to Fever Swamp. I thought Fever Swamp was just, the episode and the book were just too iconic. And this book later on in this original 62 series, was just trying to, be an imposter to it. Then I got older and I reread it and I was like, wow, this book is fantastic. I guess my taste had changed. I guess getting invested into many, many, many werewolf stories out there kind of exposed some issues that I had in terms of, uniqueness and ideas in the genre. Werewolf Skin, to me, is one of those pinnacle Goosebumps books where you can see creativity on display from R.L. Stine. You see some passion behind the typewriter to the page, and it clearly shows when Stine is able to make a book with such an iconic character, an engrossing monologue, a clever idea, a fun setting, and ultimately some dark, grisly implications and some good moral and thematic messages. This book is a perfect package. And to share with you all what this book is about out there listening, you have this main character named Alex Hunter. I think he's 11 or 12, and he's off visiting his aunt and uncle for a little while in this town called Wolf Creek because his parents are overseas on I think a photography assignment or something like that, or something to the point where he has to go to Wolf Creek to stay with his aunt and uncle, who are also photographers. And he has this magazine contest that he's hoping to enter in, where if you catch a photo of a real life monster, you can win a cash prize. And he's down to do that. It's getting near Halloween. He feels like this will be the right time of year to do so. And he has this plan on, wanting to dress up like a werewolf on Halloween. And he shares this with his aunt and uncle in the beginning of the story. But his aunt and uncle act very, very weird about him wanting to dress up as a werewolf. And you start to learn why as the story goes along, as Alex uncovers a mystery that is a little too close for home. And it's almost to the point where he's put into a situation that most adults don't even want to find themselves in. Dealing with family, dealing with mistrust, dealing with addiction, and having to help people you love go through addiction. And he has to make a lot of really mature decisions. And you get the sense throughout the story that he's growing as a person. He's growing a little more mature. He starts off a little rocky. He gets, he has his moments where you can see his childish behavior and his persona. He's very iconic for that reason. But he does mellow out a little bit, and you do see him morph throughout the story. And the ending possibly is one of the most dark endings in Goosebumps history. I think if you read the story, you'll definitely see what I'm talking about. But I've said enough. I love this book. You already know. So I'm going to pass it over to Monster Blood. Monster Blood, what do you think about Werewolf Skin, the book?
Werewolf Skin is an absolute masterpiece. I actually reread it this morning just for this video so I could have it fresh in my mind. And it's one of the few Goosebumps books that I have a very vivid memory of reading when I was younger. It was one of the few Goosebumps books that actually scared the daylights out of me. I remember clearly, I was sitting in my bedroom. It was daylight out. The sun was shining through the window. There was no reason I should have been scared. But I remember towards the end of the book, the climax when the werewolves are chasing our protagonist, Alex, for whatever reason, it scared the crap out of me. Upon reread, I don't find it to be quite as terrifying, but I think it's a very well-written book. It's one that R.L. Stine seemed to really take his time on. It's very descriptive and atmospheric, and it's kind of weird because a lot of the later books you wouldn't think that he would have put so much time and effort into. I feel like a lot of the later books aren't quite as good, maybe a little bit rushed, kind of towards the end of the lifespan of the original series. But for some reason with that one, I don't know, he just took his time on it, and it's just very well written. Alex is a very gutsy protagonist, and I kind of like that about him. It's kind of the opposite. Usually with Goosebumps protagonists, they encounter the monster or the ghost or whatever the case may be first, and then they are trying to convince their parents or their siblings, that the monster is after them. Of course, no one believes them. It's kind of the opposite in this case, where he arrives in Wolf Creek, and he has, these kids at school, Hannah, telling him about these wolves, and he doesn't believe them. So it's kind of turned around a little bit, and then Alex discovers that there may be some truth after all to these wolf legends. And when he discovers that these wolves are real, the werewolves, I should say, what does he decide to do? He decides to try to take some pictures of them to get some proof. He just stakes out these werewolves, tries to track them down. So he's a very gutsy protagonist, and I kind of like that about him, because he's also out of his element. He's like a city kid, and he's thrust into this very unusual, kind of uncomfortable situation for him. And yeah, he kind of takes charge and decides to uncover this mystery for himself, which is really cool because let's face it, a lot of Goosebumps protagonists are kind of wimpy, kind of scared of things, just trying to seek out help from others instead of doing things on their own. And yeah, I do have a couple of small nitpicks with it. I don't think it's quite perfect, but they're just very minor issues. Nothing that really ruins my overall enjoyment of the book. One thing is just kind of a personal preference issue. There's one scene, I think later in the book, where Alex is out seeking out these werewolves in the woods, and they're attacking an animal, the werewolves, and he risks his life to kind of save the animal. And it just seems kind of an odd choice to me. I'm not really sure why he did that. I don't know if it was because R.L. Stine wanted to avoid that scene and not get into the nitty gritty details of the werewolves ripping apart that animal. If you wanted to try to keep it kind of PG rated. But yeah, that just seemed kind of an odd choice to me. It felt a little bit out of place. I don't know, just a minor nitpick, just something that was personal preference for me. And then the kind of the climax of the book felt not really rushed, but it seemed like they got to the resolution a little bit too quickly. I think like it was within one, maybe two chapters where Alex and his friend Hannah are like setting out to help cure these werewolves, and it all like just happens a little bit too quickly. I think I would have liked to see that conflict play out just a little bit longer. But other than that, yeah, this book is almost like a 5 out of 5 stars for me. It's always been one of my favorites. I'm not really sure where I would put it exactly, like in my ranking. It's definitely in my top 10 of OG62, possibly top 5. It depends on the day that you ask me. So yeah, I mean, it's an absolute masterpiece. I don't know what else to say.
One thing I've totally forgot about the photography thing with Alex. Throughout the story, it has three functions. Okay, you have one function of him wanting to, gather this evidence to prove to people in Wolf Creek that werewolves exist and that he's not crazy. Second thing is he wants to use these photos to win money, and the third thing is that these photos, in a sense, are what connects him to his aunt and uncle and how he's able to find, since he's not too close with them, he uses this as a way to help solve the mystery, to help save them. And I think that's the most powerful part of the whole book. To kind of add on what you said, to further add on to what I said before, what makes this book so powerful to me is the weight of the decisions on Alex's shoulders. I think we brought this up in our vampire episode of Goosejunkies when we did Vampire Town and Vampire Breath, when we were talking about best protagonists in kids horror are usually the ones that take the risks, that don't fall into the typical trappings of being a kid. They're actually heroic, they're forthright. And Alex, he's just that type of kid that wants to do good. And I feel like when you brought up the scene where he tries to save the animal, yeah, that might sound kind of weird because when has he tried to save an animal? But at the same time, I think that kind of feeds into his character progression at that point of the story, where he's starting to like take the heroic side, and he's now like, all right, I have to save people from this. I have to make sure nobody's harmed or anything is harmed. And I think that still works thematically. But I do see where you're coming from. Great
Right.
points, Monster Blood. I love
And
the
I
story.
and I did want to. I kind of wanted to see him rip apart that deer and get some blood and gore in there. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, you got to pull the book censors. You got to irritate them just a little bit. All right, Minnesota Goosebumps fan, what do you think about Werewolf Skin's book?
Thank you to Completionist here, actually. I was able to read this book a while back, and I'm gonna say like mid-October, because he sent me this book for an amazing price. Thank you very much. And also thank you, because it was one of the best Goosebumps books I have ever read. It was fantastic, everyone. This book basically has no flaws. The only one that I do have, and it's so little that it's hard to notice, but in the last like fifth of the book, it's my only flaw, is it just gets a little bit, like a little bit senseless, but at the same time, it's still awesome, and it's almost as just fantastic as the rest of it, and it's also just one of the most fast-paced books in the entire series with tons of action. I love that part. It's nice to have a little break up between the usual slower pace. Um, and boy, I love all the characters in this one. I like the concept of this kid going to this new town and everything's just kind of creepy. I think in the episode that we'll talk about in a little bit, kind of lessens that, so I don't like it as much. This book has so much atmosphere and so much just awesome stuff in it, and it also kind of relates to Halloween in some ways, that this makes an essential October read. If you guys can get your hands on this book for at least a decent price, I'm going to say $30 or below, get it. I don't care if there's a mask in it or not. You guys need to get it immediately. It is such a good book. And yeah, episode doesn't hold too much comparison in terms of quality, but even with the story being so fantastic and the episode not changing it too much, I think that's also what helps the episode. So it shows how fantastic Stein's writing is here.
You know what's funny about this in the episode we're going to talk about? They went through multiple drafts with this book. This one's a famous one, I think, next to Cry the Cat, where the publisher gave Stein a hard time with this book. And I think they got a worse hard time in the episode version. And I'm kind of wondering which one came first, the chicken or the egg, because when they started production on the episode, the book wasn't even close to being released yet. So we'll put a pin in that for now. We'll put a pin in that for now. But great points. Great points. Edie, I want to hear what your thoughts are on Werewolf Skin, because I know me and you have a lot of similar opinions, and I've been dying to hear from you about this one.
Obviously, being a fellow member in the cult of werewolves, like these two psychopaths underneath me, yeah, I had to read this book because there was a lot of hype behind it. Everyone loves this book. It was a hidden gem of Goosebumps from what I heard. So I tried reading it without any expectations just to get the full experience. And I even read it on my vacation because when I went on vacation, I thought might as well start it off. And I love this book. It's a fantastic read. Probably has some of the best writing and best pacing that Stein's shown. And the fact that he did it later towards the second half of the series when the quality was diminishing is pretty impressive. I like Alex for the reasons that everybody brought up. He's gutsy, he's got courage. I like the photography aspect. I've always been the kind of kid who preferred photography, and the fact that he's courageous and always basically involved with that. The fact that he has the guts to go out there, investigate, kind of solve this mystery. So you kind of get that adult Scooby Doo aspect where trying to uncover the villain, but it's in a much darker, more gruesome way than the cartoon would ever be. So I like the fact he's a detective. And I forgot about the animal scene, especially when people, until they brought it up now. And I have to agree with Completionist. I think it's pretty brave the fact that, he's willing to try to help as many people as he can. Yesterday, my bartender tried to rescue a bat inside of my hotel. And as soon as the thing started screeching, I hauled ass into the other room. So definitely a lot braver than I am when it comes to animals. And on top of that, this book has fantastic gore. You wouldn't expect that. This book is dark, it's gory, it's got violence, it's got explicit violence within it. So you kind of get that darker aspect of Goosebumps that everybody loves. And I have to agree, I think the ending is super dark. The fact that, a potential ally can turn into a villain just that quickly and done in such a horrific way for a certain character is super dark. And I loved it a lot. So this one, for me, probably gets a 9.7 out of 10. I thought it was a great read. And I definitely think everybody should read it. In terms of negatives, I do have to say, I think that the beginning is sort of my least favorite part. I enjoy the setup, but I think it is a bit slower compared to all the action you get within the second half and the finale. However, I do have to say I do like the setting, and I think that sort of softens the blow. The fact that all these kids are involved in the urban legend, and the fact that you get this scene where Alex is the one who basically doesn't believe it, and everybody else is like, "Are you crazy? Of course we believe that stuff." And he's like, "What? What do I believe? Who should I, be following here?" And it makes it more interesting. So not a big negative. This one is in my S tier for the OG62, and I recommend everybody reads it.
Great points, BD. Soda, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I'd like to add on to what Monster Blood and BD said, where they said that this was when the series was kind of lessening in quality, at least the OG series. I actually I have to agree with that statement, but I also think I almost wonder if Stein got like a raise or something, and he was like, "Oh, I gotta type some great stories in this," because he made four back-to-back bangers. He made Deep Trouble 2, Haunted School, Werewolf Skin, and I Live in Your Basement. That's rare for Goosebumps. I mean, for the first 20 books maybe, but anything past that, you don't see that much. So really awesome that all these rare series books, later series books, are so awesome. But then we don't talk about Monster Blood 4. But yeah, those four at least, pretty awesome. I almost wonder, once again, if he got like a raise or something, because it's just crazy how he produced like 4 10 out of 10 books in the span of like a few months.
Yeah.
Well, going back to the point I brought up, I think the publishers during the time, whoever was in charge of proofreading his books, maybe it was his ghostwriting team, I don't know. There was some consternation already starting to form at this point from Scholastic thinking that he was using ghostwriters, I'm pretty sure. But it didn't come to fruition until years later. But at this point in time, I always thought that he just had a chip on his shoulder, or maybe he just was saving some good ideas for last and wanted to give the series a good high note to end on. Whatever the case may be, he did produce a stretch of really great books. I think some of the best of the original 62 and that very tail end of the series. So yeah, great points, everyone. Let's bring up Spongy's and Dummy's points. I don't think Ultimate Goosebumps Man contributed anything for this episode.
All right, let's bring it up. It's also good that you mentioned Deep Trouble Bruce, because I have to say that I think that's another reason why Alex is a good main character, because he's kind of like Billy Deep. They're both pretty courageous, and they don't, act like babies or get scared easily. So makes you more confident.
Some of the best in those 4 books, that span of 4, I'm telling you, it has some of the best protagonists in Goosebumps. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm going to read off Dummies first, and he has a really analytical and in-depth description of how he feels about Werewolf Skin. Haven't read this one in a while, and I didn't read it, being one of the main reasons why I'm not on tonight. And I don't want spoilers because I don't remember crap, but I do remember liking the book a lot, around the 8 to 9, 10 area, or 8 to 9 out of 10 area. Really solid, but can't iterate on it much. Very, very philosophical. And then let's read Spongies. This is also very philosophical. I don't have much to add aside from what everybody else thinks. I'm not in love with it per se, but there isn't much to dislike. Cool lore and good atmosphere. It's rock solid.
Short and sweet from them. All right, yeah. So I think they kind of summed it up perfectly for Werewolf Skin's book. It's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's a classic of Goosebumps, a must read. But what about the episode? What about the episode? Minnesota, do you want to carry us over and talk about the Werewolf Skin episode for us?
Yeah, sure. So, the Werewolf Skin episode, my friends, is essentially just werewolf skin, except, you know how there is just regular water and sparkling water? Well, werewolf skin is that fancy sparkling water that, like, you kind of want to love, and some people and some people will think that you're crazy for liking it, but it just has something about it for like a few moments, and then something, it kind of goes your own way. I'll say that. Some people have some very interesting thoughts on Werewolf Skin, but the episode takes away that sparkling water, and you just have the regular water, and not just any water, but the septic tank water, the water that's been filtered out of just piles of doo-doo. And here's what I will say. I already mentioned this, is the Werewolf Skin book has such an amazing concept, to the point where, as the episode does carry on with it for the most part, I think we can all agree on that, it actually does make the episode pretty enjoyable. But once again, there's just that certain remnants of feces lurking around that just drops the score. It drops the score. It's not as good, and it's not as, like, professional, I guess. It doesn't feel okay. You know what? I might have to add completionist onto this, because I just remembered that this was actually made before the book. So forget what I just said.
Let me give you all background context before I pass around further. So the Werewolf Skin episode was in the handful of episodes in the show that started production before the book counterpart even released. So I don't know whether there was an initial script concept or initial draft or what the case may have been. But for starters, the character's name is Alex Blackwell in the episode, where he's Alex Hunter in the book. So that should be a moniker saying that they possibly had a draft going on. But what makes the episode so infamous was that it was 2 things. The first thing was the head show writers, Dan Angel and Billy Brown, had a falling out with Scholastic because they actually wanted to make this episode super dark, like a 2-parter. They wanted to go balls to the wall. They had a scene with an animal, I think, from the book, but they actually wanted to do it pretty grisly on screen. And the studio said, no, we're not doing that. And because of creative differences, they decided to part ways with Protocol Entertainment and the production company. So they had Ron Oliver, a guy who's known for directing cheesy, fun episodes, come in and rewrite the script. And even he met with studio pushback, and it went through countless, and I mean countless, rewrites before they settled on one to go into production. So the end product here, so it seems like a nerfed version of the book, where you couldn't get all the darkness or the dark moments, or even half the good as atmosphere as the book had. You had a serviceable one. Wolf Creek is still a woodland area. It's still atmospheric in its own way, in that Canadian low budget way. But you're missing the serious tones the book had. You're missing. I mean, there's certain things that made that book work thematically that I just don't think are executed the best in the episode. The episode is definitely more comedic. Even the entire the opening to it is different. You have introductions of characters like the bus driver lady that's saying "Have a nice night, kid," and like just being over the top for no reason. Stuff like that. That's the Ron Oliver-isms in this episode. Then you have Arjun and Sean, who are characters in the book, but they're definitely played up way more comedically in the episode. And also weirdly race swap for some reason, but that's not the biggest point I want to bring across. But they're definitely used for more comedic relief. And then you have Alex, who definitely feels like his book counterpart. I think this is probably one of the more spot-on acting performances or acting casting from the show. But even he is more lighthearted and not taking things as seriously as he was in the book. And I don't really feel that believability in his character. Aside from all that, I think my biggest gripes with this episode is the final act, where they completely changed the entirety of what happens in the book. Not getting into too many spoilers, but they definitely took a lot of liberties in what they did in the final act. And let's just say, Ron Oliver had to act for random explosions, and we see one here, and it's very goofy. That's all I'm gonna say. It's just a goofy episode. It's definitely a downgrade, wholesale, but I don't hate it. I think I have weird bias with it just because I think that it's hilarious. But if I'm being honest, compared to the book, I can kind of see where Bruce is coming from with the feces. There is that fart joke idea going on there that I can kind of see. So, yeah, I'll pass it off to Monster Blood now. What do you think about the Werewolf Skins episode? So I don't think I've ever heard you talk about it.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have much of an opinion to give on the episode. I haven't seen it in a very long time, since I was a kid, probably. So I don't really remember a whole lot about it, but I do remember not really liking it all that much. As with probably the majority of the episodes from the show, I didn't care for them as much as the book, so I preferred to just stick with the books. Yeah, so I don't have much of an opinion to give on the episode, unfortunately.
Interesting. Okay. Well, maybe you could rewatch it so you can see where we're coming from. Because I know BD thinks the same. It thinks it's a downgrade. Some people think it's a significant downgrade. And I want to hear how significant it is for BD here. What do you think about Werewolf Skins episode?
So first of all, sparkling water sucks. So the original book is regular water, ice cold regular water. This is sparkling water because, to me, the book had better pacing, better writing. It just had better material. And on top of that, I can understand, there's a lot of episodes that were made before the books were finalized. So they have to go off of rough scripts. They're not put in the best foundation. However, I have to judge the episode from what it is. And it is a downgrade from the book, in my opinion. It's significant, but it's not a bad episode by any means. I think if you looked at this as a standalone episode, it's good. If you compare it to Werewolf Skin, you're going to be left wanting more. Some of the things that kind of I enjoy about the episode, I do like the fact that they kind of harp more on the addiction aspect with the episode. You get a real sense that the parents are struggling with addiction, with putting on, something. I don't want to spoil too much, but you guys kind of know what the deal is. Putting on something, having that taken away from them. You see how much they're struggling. You can see how they basically kind of act like, our podcast is called Goosejunkies. They act like crack junkies involving the skin. They act weird around Alex, and he kind of picks up on it. He doesn't understand their behavior, and you have that gap between the characters' relationship and understanding. I like the fact that the episode stuck to the town, knowing about werewolves and the lore behind it. And I think the classroom scene in the episode is pretty well done. I think it's effective, despite some of the acting in it. But I think it overall helps out with the impact of the story. And really, my only main complaints are the climax does have this very goofy scene in hindsight involving something trying to dig its way out of the dirt. It looks quite stupid. And then for some reason, 5 pounds of C4 go off and combust the entire forest. They hit a Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 airstrike on these pieces of skin for some reason. And then Alex, to me, is better in the book. I think he's more enjoyable. I can kind of get the sense that he's more gutsy. In the episode, he's more sassy. I guess that works for certain character adaptations, but for him, it just seemed like he had more of an attitude, kind of harped more on the city kid aspect. And I didn't resonate with him as much as I did in the book. And the two bullies, stupid. I'm an Indian guy. There's no white guy named Arjun. I can say that. You see the skin. Listen, man. No white guy named Arjun. Should have kept the names the way it was. All right. You're not going to see me, my name being Thomas or Michael. I'm not named that, by the way. So, yeah, that's. And on top of that, did you see the acting from Arjun? That guy cannot act, man. And I know it was done on purpose. But the fact that, the teacher's like, oh, you believe in werewolves? And then the one bully's like, yeah, we believe in werewolves. And then the guy turns around and goes, werewolves. I'm like, dude, please, no. There's no way he got paid to do that. I mean, listen, Goosebumps has better access than Salvation Army. The bullies got hired from Salvation Army. It is what it is. But, despite those criticisms, I still think it's a good episode. This will get a 7.3 out of 10. It's above average. It's a good episode. I think you should watch it as a standalone. You're going to have some scary scenes like the jump scare at the window with the werewolves, other stuff. I like the camera aspect. But a lot of it is just kind of, you don't relate to the characters as much. The acting sort of shows. And the climax is way goofier. And the ending involving a certain character is about like 5 tiers less dark than what was in the book. The book's ending super dark. The ending in the episode is like, I guess, friendly, nice. I guess the person's being nice to a certain character to an extent, even if it is, I guess, okay. So yeah, above average, good. That's what it would get. But a major downgrade from the book.
Okay. Flavored sparkling water. I forgot. There's a difference.
That's
Flavored. And what?
Okay, so you're going from flavored sparkling water to unflavored. That's a better comparison because I could totally see it there. But yeah, to kind of add on to what BD said, I do agree that Alex is way sassier in the episode. It feels like the beginning of the book, Alex, that we got was sassy, but I feel like the episode, he just stayed sassy the whole time. I mean, you kind of got a glimpse of that in the book, but he definitely matured and mellowed out over time. He had some type of character growth. In the episode, you don't really feel that. He's just sassy and he's a smart ass, essentially, the whole time. And some people might prefer that. Some people might think he's funnier or something. That's fine. But yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of points you said. Like I said, I'm not as harsh on it. But yeah, let's bring up Spongy and Dummies real quick, and then we'll make our verdict, and then we'll pick the victor to go face off against the next story we have to talk about.
All right, let's see.
I think it's also funny how you immediately, like in the book, it's kind of sprinkled, but in the episode, you can immediately tell the sassiness level is just like sky high because this, as soon as the bus comes rolling into frame, you already can tell that
his eyes are rolling and he's trying to get off the bus, and the bus lady, who's the same lady that's in Deep Trouble 2's episode.
Really?
The girl, yeah, the one, the woman, the housemaid that ends up in the very ending of part 2 with the guy in the fish tank. Yeah, she plays the bus lady in Werewolf Skin.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right, so we have Dummy's thoughts, Werewolf Skin episode. Quite an episode, to say the least. Acting was fine, okay writing, and had a good plot. I'm pretty sure this one is very different from the book. I quite enjoyed the climax and scenes where the werewolves are attacking. Good twist, but it takes a minute to get somewhere, and the nightmare sequence was weird AF. 8 out of 10. I don't know if that's controversial, but I don't give a bump. And then let's go to Spongy. So his idea was that it's a downgrade, but it's fine. Ron Oliver's direction gives it some fun / weird bits, but it does feel padded with so many shoulder scares that they lampshade it. A lesser 2-parter, but it's not bad.
Yeah, the jump scares and the dream sequences in the episode, I definitely think are played up more exaggerated than the book as well. Like I think there are some scenes like that in the book, but they're very quick because the pacing's so good. In the episode, it's kind of slow in that part one, so those things stick out more like sore thumbs. But yeah, I think that all just proves our point. Werewolf Skins episode's a downgrade, not as anywhere near as good as the book. Which brings us to Nightmare Inn, and I want to pass it over to you, BD. Nightmare Inn was the story that you wanted to compare to Werewolf Skin. So why don't you tell us about the story and what you think about it?
So, Nightmare Inn, I'll start off with the episode. The episode is basically about this girl who recently deals with the passing away of her father. He was in a car accident and she's grieving through his loss, and his mother is grieving as well. And they end up deciding to stay at this basically kind of like mini hotel, right? They're staying at this place which is called Night Inn. And the mother sees this as her way to keep the connection with the father. This was basically their first kind of date together, and they spent time at this inn, so she feels like it's a way to connect with him. And the daughter is given this silver necklace, which was basically a gift, a parting gift from him, to basically for her to remember him. And you can tell there's a lot of good emotional moments throughout there. And as they arrive at Night Inn, something is off because first of all, the place looks very kind of ramshackle. It looks abandoned, looks kind of eerie and scary. So the daughter gets this bad vibe, especially because the episode starts off with nightmare sequences because the girl's been having these terrible nightmares, which may or may not lead to future events that actually happen. So they really unnerve her, and she remembers seeing this place in her nightmare. And the mother kind of just shrugs it off. They head in there and they meet the caretaker of the inn called Priscilla. Now, Priscilla is this very sort of ominous kind of younger girl, just a couple years older than the main character, but she's very mellow tone, melodrama. However, when she is talking, you can tell like she has like this predatory aspect to her where she's kind of like looking through you, spying on you. She kind of stalks the family a little bit. And as they head up to this inn, the daughter right away senses something is not right. This deja vu floods her. She feels like she's seen a lot of these moments before in her nightmares, and there's a lot of ominous things that come from it. And you start to realize the mystery behind this inn and how it may potentially tie to her family and the real truth behind what happened to her father. And that's where I'll leave it at. This episode, the first time I watched it, got a 9 out of 10. I don't know if I took a hit from Wiz Khalifa's bong because that's not what it got upon a rewatch. I forgot how many dream sequences there are in this episode, which really kind of downgrade the score. I gave it a 9 out of 10 the first time, and I thought it was great. And I think the material in the episode is pretty good, and it would score a higher score if it wasn't for the structure of the episode. The structure of the episode really does not help the story. Those nightmare and dream sequences lead to a lot of retconning, which may or may not be reality by the end of the episode. You kind of have to infer that and decide what you want to believe. And as soon as you get to basically like halfway through the episode, you start realizing that there's kind of pacing problems because there's a lot of kind of jump cuts. They kind of jump away from storylines and kind of bounce all over the place. And you don't really get to spend as much time with the characters as you would hope. I kind of wish that Haunting Hour did two-parters more because I think this would really benefit from a two-parter and fleshing out the characters and story better and helping out the pacing. But it is what it is. It's still good. It's still fine. Also, Haunting Hour, this kind of has the early problems of Haunting Hour where, for some reason, they haven't heard about natural lighting and sunlight because this episode is super dark and grim throughout the entire thing. And every character happens to be like an edgelord. Priscilla has an edginess to her. The main character is an edgelord. Oh, Mom, leave me alone. I'm grieving. Don't talk to me. I hate you, Mom. And then, that one guy pulls up on her and he's got the hair slicked to the side and he's sort of creepy. He's got the flannel. He's like, maybe we should hang out sometime. I'm kind of a bad boy. I've been in and out the mental asylum, but don't trust Priscilla. She's always bad mouthing me. And I'm like, what is this mellow teen drama? Completely forgot it until this rewatch. Kind of takes away from it. But it is fun. I like the family aspects. I think this episode has good emotional grasp to it. And I think the climax and the ending are quite impactful in terms of the story. And I like that emotional resolution to her, the main character and her relationship with her father. I just wish it was done better and better executed. But it gets a 7.5 out of 10. Good episode. I suggest you still watch it. But do not expect this to be one of the heavy hitters from Haunting Hour. There are a lot better episodes out there. So those are my thoughts.
All right. So we're starting with the episode and then going to the short story?
Sir.
All right. All right. So I'm going to pass it over to Monster Blood. Did you have a chance to see the episode, Monster Blood?
I have seen the episode somewhat recently, and
Okay.
I think it's fine. I don't know. I think kind of like what BD mentioned. I remember thinking some of the dialogue and the characters, their behavior, and some of their interactions. It's just kind of corny to me, and I don't know. It takes me out of the story a little bit. I don't really care for that. And the dream sequences definitely hurt the story a little bit too. I don't really care for that as much. I don't know. The episode is just fine for me. It's probably like a 3 out of 5 stars. It's okay. I don't hate it. It's nothing fantastic. It's just average, maybe slightly above average. So yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about that one.
Yeah, I have a lot to say, and I really agree with that sentiment that it's average. But we have to pass it over to Minnesota because I know him and Dummies have a few things to say about the episode since we're talking about that first. Bruce, what do you think about Nightmare Inn's episode?
Well, the episode, as the little kids would like to say, is mid. It's one of the most boring episodes so far. And, after watching 4 episodes of this series, I think I can definitively say this show is not for me. Apparently, the mascot, which is just one of the best things in kids' horror history, I thought was okay. And then the other ones I just didn't like very much, personally. I think these are all very okay. I don't think any of them are very bad, but they're also not very good. I don't have much to say on this episode besides it's just a cringe fest. Basically, the short story, but you got like an emo kid in there. You got some definitely, you got some things that definitely damper the plot. Not enjoyable. Like Monster Blood said, the dream sequences are just not it. I hate dream sequences and fake outs. And this episode, it has a lot of that. So overall, 4 out of 10. I couldn't get into it.
Okay, might be kind of a low score, but fair enough, fair enough. BD, what does Spongy and Dummies have to say about the episode specifically?
Well, what Dummies has to say, I don't condone it all, people, but I'm going to read it as if I'm reading it like him. But okay, this is quote unquote, word for word, what he says about Nightmare Inn's episode. Oh my, I don't even want to read this, bro. Do I have, first of all, people, this is not who I am. Anything that he says cannot be taken out of context. This is me reading off a script. Do not clip this. Do not use this in the future and try to, maim me. All right. Hot doo doo, garbaggio, the cheeks, flavored condoms, level poop. Oh boy. Close second to a creature with stirring and horridness. The werewolves look awful. The father stuff though was interesting. Interesting, only props I'm giving today. Played into the climax in a stupid way. Boring as heck too. Did I mention the climax is just goofily dumb? God, this was crap. Anywho, oh my god. Anywho, whoever is reading this is a professional Walmart shopping cart hijacker. This episode is 1 out of 10 biggest and hopefully the only L this year. I'm going to send a pipe bomb to this kid. All right, anyway, we're on to what Sponge said.
Okay,
Nightmare Inn episode, whatever. Nightmare Inn episode, this episode is able to do, oh, no, this is a good review. This episode is able to do more, but as an early episode, they haven't quite nailed everything yet. Still, it's pretty good, and they're able to do more with the dad thing, even if it means going in a weird direction with it. It feels like a trial run for similar stories down the line, but the nice stuff here makes it good. Love that they say hell and the mom makes a sex joke. Agreed.
Oh yeah, she does.
Yeah.
I forgot that. And I was thinking in my head when I was watching this. I'm
I
like,
don't
oh,
remember that.
Not necessarily her, but I think she says that this was the first time that and then the daughter cuts her off and goes, "Mom, TMI." And she's like, "What? I took him out for brunch."
Oh yeah.
Okay, so I guess I am more forgiving, like spongy on this episode here. We're kind of going into the episode into the short story for me, so I'll start off the short story, intermixing with my thoughts with this one. So the episode to me, I think definitely filled in some hollow points the short story had. I think, comparing this to the short story is one of those tales as old as times, if you go back to the old Goosebumps show, where often the Goosebumps episodes sometimes improved on the source material, like Haunted Mass 2, for example. This is nowhere near Haunted Mass 2 level out of the park, but they definitely made up for the short story's lackness for me. The only problem with it is you kind of fall into the predictability territory. I think the episode's mostly fine. You have this girl named Jill. She has this tragic past, losing her dad. Her mom and her are staying at this inn where apparently in the episode they're trying to buy the inn, which I thought was kind of an intriguing change of pace. But the suspects of who these villains are going to be are painfully obvious. I mean, it's so obvious that you find yourself waiting until the climax for it to actually happen. And when you disconnect the audience by making it so predictable, it's not enjoyable. And the episode's very serious tone. Have you noticed that? It's just super serious the whole time. There's no lighthearted moments other than some few jokes between the mom and the girl. Everything else is just kind of weighed down by being too serious for me. And then when you get to the climax, right? You get a sense of what the story is really talking about. I think in the short story version, they did not have this message whatsoever. The episode what it's trying to get across is when you lose a loved one, they're always around in some way. That's the message of the episode, and quite literally, that's what you get. And I'm not going to go any further than that, but I'll say it involves Jill's father. But there's three. I counted three dream sequences that are so confusing and so lazily put in there that they serve nothing to the story. You would think that the story would play on the dreams like the short story didn't do, and instead make the dreams more of a plot focus and maybe make her like a psychic or something, or maybe she's predicting the future. They never play into that. I mean, you have this brief glimpse where she goes into the room that she predicted in one of the scenes, or I guess in one of the dream sequence fake outs, of the same door that she was in. But none of this stuff really feels like it matters. It just feels like it's there to be kind of similar to the short story. And especially the third one, which is easily the longest and probably most egregious fake out, is so confusing because as an audience, you're like, did any of this stuff in the climax actually happen? Or did it happen and she fall asleep because of a jump cut, like you brought up, BD? The jump cuts are not good editing. It definitely shows itself. It's an early episode. They had a lot to learn with the editing process. And the makeup effects for the werewolf, I should say, are not that good. There's another episode it reminds me of from the Nightmare Room called Full Moon Halloween. Almost identical werewolf makeup there. And we should talk about that episode in book one day because that's very interesting. But yeah, not the best here. But nonetheless, I think it's just kind of too basic, kind of too generic. I tie it to a Goosebumps book I've read because it has a lot of similar problems. And it's The Werewolf in the Living Room. The problem with that book was its pacing and its structure. Here we have just too many dream sequences, like the beginning of Living Room had. You kind of have an inverted premise with the kid trying to get close to his dad instead of losing his dad. But even then, that stuff gets predictable. You have these red herring villains that are so obvious. We've seen it done similarly in other werewolf stories in Goosebumps in the past. I don't remember if it was in Living Room, but it's very similar to that. It just has a lot of those ailments that book had, and I just don't feel like it does anything new with it. It's just fine. It has a good, I guess, message dealing with, like, connections to her father and all that. It's kind of heartfelt. I thought it was decent performed. The acting wasn't too terrible at all. I quite enjoyed it, and the setting was decent too. But yeah, nothing else to say about it. The short story, however, we're going to move into this. This just is more all over the place for me. I think that, you have this element with Jill in the short story where she lost her dad, but it never matters to what happens in the story. It's just there. Like, Stein puts it in there to make her easily sympathetic, but doesn't build on that in the story or connect it like the episode tried to do. And I feel like it's kind of missing something there. And when you're going into all, the events of the story, it's very quick paced. Some of these characters have very, very short, brief introductions, and there's really no time to build them up as some sort of mystery threat or ominous threat, even in the climax. It's just very rushed through. Not my taste whatsoever. I'd probably give it like a low meh. So that's where I'm at, like a 3 out of 5 stars for that one. Nothing else to say. But I'm gonna pass it over to Monster Blood for the short story. What did you think about Nightmare Inn's short story?
So my thoughts on the short story are honestly kind of the same as the episode. Probably like a 3 out of 5. I think it was fine. It was okay. If we're comparing them, the short story isn't as bad with like the dream sequences and stuff and fake out scares, and it doesn't have some of that like cringy character interaction and dialogue that's in the episode. But the problem with it is it's just so short that not a lot happens in it. And even though there isn't as many dream sequences in it, I think there's only one. It still feels like they shouldn't be wasting any time with that stuff when these stories are only like 10 pages long. And I didn't really like how rushed and the climax was and the ending. It just feels like everything happens right there at the end, and then you're just left kind of puzzled with a little bit of a twist ending. And it's just, yeah, I don't know. Again, probably like a 3 out of 5 for this one. It's fine to me. I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, I just like I'm in a similar boat where I just don't think it's good, but I don't think it's bad either. And I've read way worse. And that's the only one I read from Nightmare Hour. I'm gonna try to make a review on it. I know y'all have read the whole book. I heard there's a lot better stories in there, but this one wasn't it, y'all. It was not it. But I know Minnesota has a difference in opinion on this. What's your thoughts on the short story, Minnesota?
I actually really liked it. For how short it is, it reminds me of, because this is obviously the first time I've read one of these books. Well, a story from one of them. It really reminds me of like a Tales to Give You Goosebumps book, but the story, of course, is a little bit longer since it, of course, is just a bigger book. Um, and speaking of werewolves, not to go off into a tangent, but there actually is a few werewolf stories in that. So maybe one day we can talk about those. But yeah, this was a very interesting short story. I had to sadly experience the episode before this. I did not deserve that pain and suffering, but I I went through it. And yeah, this book, I was not having high expectations at all. And it honestly might be my favorite werewolf thing that Stein has done so far. Better than Werewolf Skin, possibly. Better,
All right,
better,
quit the cap.
better than the episode of Nightmare Inn. Definitely better than that. Probably better than the Werewolf Skin episode. It's kind of hard. The Werewolf Skin book and this, I'd say, are almost in a tie. Uh, this was what? This was a fantastic short story, and yeah, I highly recommend this one. I really liked everything about it, to be honest. I think the atmosphere is actually pretty creepy, and the guy who in the episode is like emo and he's all, oh yeah. In this, he's actually like creepy. He's like, go away from me, I'm gonna kill you. And like that is creepy. That's cool too. You don't see that. And there's gore. There actually is gore in this book. So I'm actually intrigued to read the rest of this book all these other stories in it, because man, that was just fantastic. I hope everybody can read that at one point. DM Completionist, he's got the screenshots. They're amazing. All I'm gonna say is that short story was awesome. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. That's all that matters. All right, and let's let's pass it over to BD. What do you think about Nightmare Inn's short story?
This is just moments before a completionist gets kicked off of a platform for pirating a short story. But that aside, the way I felt about the short story, I mean, when I first read Nightmare Hour, obviously the only other person who read it was like Spongy and Monster Blood. And Monster Blood told me Nightmare Inn was one of his favorite stories from there after finishing the collection. I told him to stop hitting Seth Rogen's blunt because I don't know what he was thinking about that. But obviously, I'm a little bit salty that this basic story, in my opinion, managed to get adapted as opposed to some of the stories from Haunting Hour, the short story collection, which has so many fantastic stories in there. Because this one is super average to me. In terms of how I feel about it, I'm more generous with it now, considering that I rewatched the episode and I felt the way that I did. And then now reading the short story, I bumped it up from like a 5 out of 10 or 4 out of 10 to a 6.5. I think it's fine, okay, but it's leaning more towards like the better version of fine. I do like some of the decisions they made in the short story compared to the episode. I think the ending to this short story is creepier than the episode. I think what they do with a certain character is a much better direction than the episode. Although the episode had better emotional impact, which I can commend. I think it is a little bit creepier towards the climax. I like the action in the climax of the short story. I don't agree at all that the one emo boy is worse than the guy in the book, because I thought the guy in the book was super corny and predictable, of him being, oh, please get away from me, I turn into a werewolf. And
Come
it's like,
on.
it's
What?
corny. I think
You're
the emo
lying.
boy, I think the emo boy is better because he's, pretending that he has a crush on the main character, and it's more predatory, which fits with what that person turns out to be. And yeah, I think it's an average story, 6.5 out of 10. Kind of sad that it got adapted. Kind of sad it got adapted, Mr. Best R.L. Stein werewolf piece. But yeah, it's okay. That's all I have. Nothing much to it. It's a short story, so not much material.
All right, let's see what Dummies and Spongy have to say before we declare a victor on Werewolf Skin versus Nightmare Inn.
Unbelievable. It's
Alright,
hard
let's
to
start.
tolerate.
Oh, now you know how we feel. All right, moving on. Let's see. Nightmare Inn story from Spongy. This is 13 pages. It's not enough time for what is presented here. It's a bit of a heavy setup, and I think it weighs it down. It's too short to quite work as a psychological horror story like it needs to. I think just making it more straightforward would work. Otherwise, it flows okay, isn't creepy enough. I like the twist ending, but yeah, the rest of it could have been tighter and needed to be longer. I'll move on to dummies. That actually does. That was the point that I forgot to say was I think this idea is too ambitious for a short story. I think they could have chosen something better that fits the 13-page restraint. And then for a Nightmare Inn story by dummies, it was okay. I like the idea that it's not insanely original and engaging. Characters are fine. The ending leaves a lot to be desired. Good opening and to the point climax. 6.5 out of 10. Same score as me.
All right, so I think the consensus is that we have one book, Werewolf Skin, masterpiece, and then we have Nightmare Inn, a short story, fine. So clear victor goes to Goosebumps on this one. Werewolf Skin takes the crown on this one for most superior werewolf tale. Now, werewolf tales are a tale as old as time. They go back way back to ancient Europe, pretty much, where you have these old folk tales, old legends talking about these creatures, and they were called lycans, I think, back in the day. And the phenomenon of werewolf tales, especially when horror literature became massive, getting into that late 1700s and throughout the 1800s, werewolves saw like a rise in folktale retellings and all that. And then when the movies came in Hollywood around the turn of this 20th century, that's when werewolves became a huge, huge subgenre in horror. In modern horror today, almost every series you can look into, anthology horror wise, has a handful of werewolf tales in them. They're just easy to write. You know, you have something that goes that far back. There's no proprietary things on them. You can write whatever. And because of that, there's just a plethora of werewolf tales. So I'm going to open up the floor. Whoever wants to grab this first. What are some of y'all's favorite werewolf stories or movies out there? Whoever wants to start first.
Guess let Minnesota go up. He's got.
All right, Minnesota, you got Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman.
All my fellow 2000s, and actually, I think this came out in the 90s, so 90s kids as well will know about this infamous DVD double feature that was sold at the dollar store back then. This was a classic. You got Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein, which is not as good, but this one is fire. This is, in my opinion, the original werewolf the Wolfman movie from way back in like the 40s, I think, is actually probably my least favorite Universal monster movie. As shocking as that sounds, I like all the other ones a lot better. My favorite has always been like the Invisible Man. I just always loved that concept. Also, really liking the book so far, so that's interesting. But yeah, we have this right here, Alvin and the Chipmunks. Classic childhood icons. Meet Frankenstein on the right here, and Wolfman, which I think is far superior. And I watched this thing so many times as a kid, and I would like try to put the DVD in myself to the point where this DVD is all scratched up, and it works all right. And I still watch it every single year as a Halloween annual. But ooh, it's got some wear. So it shows how awesome it is. Yeah, this is a really fun movie. I would highly recommend if you have kids, or if you're at the age range, or if you have somebody in your family you want to show them this. I think it is probably free on demand or something. It's not very popular. It actually is really fun, and I actually like it, dare I say it, more than the original Wolfman movie. I don't know. It's really it's pretty fun. I'm gonna recommend this to all four of you guys, to all three of you guys, and everyone watching. This is a fun movie that everyone should watch on Halloween, or near that time of year. And also, you can watch Frankenstein as well, but it's not as good, which is shocking because Frankenstein, in my opinion, not to go off into a tangent again, but is the far superior monster. You can tell that Alvin and the Chipmunks said, you know what, Wolfman, he's not as good, so we have to pay justice to the system. And they gave him a classic. So, yeah, highly recommend. Check it out. 10 out of 10.
All right, I'll take over. All right, so I'm gonna pass it over to Monster Blood. Monster Blood, what is some of your favorite werewolf stories?
All right, so I do want to say that first that I have seen Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman. I used to watch that quite a bit as a kid, actually. I haven't seen it in a very long time, so I probably will go back and rewatch that. But I do have a few things here I want to show off. The first one is a book, and it is a kid's horror book, but it is not Goosebumps. And it is from the American Chiller series. This is Wisconsin Werewolves. And back when I was a kid, before I got into Goosebumps, I think I started on these a little bit before Goosebumps. This was probably my favorite like kids horror book of all time. I absolutely love this. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And it hasn't aged quite as well. It's mostly nostalgia that I have for this, but I still think it's a decent book. It's one of the better Chillers books. If it's a series that maybe you haven't explored a lot of, or maybe haven't read many books from, I would say that this is a good starting point. Just keep in mind that Jonathan Rand's level of writing is nowhere near R.L. Stein's. But yeah, this is just a decent werewolf story that I wanted to mention. And then I have a few movies here that I wanted to bring up. The first one is a Stephen King movie. This is Silver Bullet. And he actually wrote the script for this. And this is a rare case where I think the movie adaptation is actually better than the source material. So I read Cycle of the Werewolf for my first time, I believe last year, and it was fine. It was decent, but it was just kind of a basic werewolf story. There wasn't really a lot going on with it. The movie is so much more fun. It's got like just a lot of the cheesy, campy, like 80s vibes to it. The characters in here are a lot more enjoyable, more entertaining. And yeah, I prefer the movie over the book. Um, and then we have another movie that Minnesota fan was dissing on. This is the original Wolfman movie that came out in 1942, I want to say, 1941. This is probably my favorite Universal Monsters film and my favorite werewolf movie of all time. Of course, everyone knows about the original Wolfman movie. This was what made werewolves popular. It spawned countless other werewolf movies on top of this. And yeah, this movie is just a classic. I like how it's more of an psychological and kind of like an emotional exploration of werewolves. It doesn't depict the werewolf as just like a straight up monster or villain that needs to be defeated and killed. It shows our protagonist, acted by Lon Chaney Jr., and kind of his struggle with this disease, and it shows how he doesn't really know whether or not he's a werewolf and trying to figure out how to like solve this, I guess. And yeah, this movie is just an absolute classic, all-time favorite werewolf movie. And then one last movie I want to show off real quick, completely different, also an animated film, and this is Scooby-Doo and the Reluctant Werewolf. Right there, yeah. This is actually like a 4-pack here. It's got 4 Scooby-Doo movies in one. And this is a Scooby-Doo movie that I feel like doesn't get talked about a whole lot in various rankings and ratings that I've seen for the Scooby-Doo franchise. A lot of people seem to say that this one is just kind of average or mid, but I think this is one of my favorite Scooby-Doo movies. I think it's got a lot of good humor in it, a lot of good jokes. It actually gets me to laugh. It's pretty cool. I like the plot of it to where Shaggy essentially turns into a werewolf, and he is forced to compete in this monster race along with these other monsters, Dracula, Frankenstein, all of these other classic iconic monsters. And I think he has to win the race in order to turn back into human. And yeah, I love The Reluctant Werewolf. I think it's a classic, one of my favorite Scooby-Doo movies. So yeah, and that's all I have.
You know, I picked this book up a while ago, and it makes me think about you every time. If you can find one of these, pick this up. It's called My Brother the Werewolf. And it's one of these Avon kids horror books. And I think you
don't
might
think I've
like
ever
this.
seen that before.
Yeah, it looks like a Bruce Coville outer space werewolf tale. It looks wild. Yeah, but yeah, I've always thought to recommend this to you. Here's
Who's
the
it by?
time. I'm gonna recommend this to you. I've never read it. I picked it up for like $1 at like a book show or something like that.
Who's
But yeah,
who's the author of it?
Nancy Garden. Never heard of her.
You guys want to hear a really cool fact about the original Wolfman movie from the 40s? Is
What?
the entire transformation scene, you know, that part? It was done, like the actor who plays the Wolfman was sitting still for hours and hours and hours while they continuously just pointed the camera down and did all the makeup. How crazy is that?
You just gotta put some more respect on Lon Chaney Jr. You just gotta appreciate what that guy and his father did for the horror movie genre as a whole. DD, what is your favorite werewolf tale or movie? Great picks, by the way, Monster Blood.
Obviously, since my brother Monster Blood is here, I have to talk about the Tales book, Werewolf's First Night, the most understood werewolf story. No, I'm kidding. I'm not talking about that. I have 3 werewolf stories that I'll be talking about. So, first one, this one is basically a werewolf story that shocked me how good it is. And this may kind of be cheating because obviously the name of this podcast and it does relate to that. And that is the Werewolf of Fever Swamp episode. This to me is a great piece of werewolf media because it's basically shot like a miniature movie and it adds so much to the Werewolf of Fever Swamp book in terms of making the hermit a lot scarier, adding more to his character, more lore. I love the way that they shoot the werewolf scenes of the werewolf chasing the family. That barnyard scene is genuinely terrifying and it's genuinely well shot and scary, and I loved it. And I love overall just sort of the feel, the vibe of Fever Swamp, the idea of how terrifying it can be, how nobody's really safe, how eerie it is. and just the action within this Fever Swamp episode is just really well done. And I think it's probably one of the best episodes out there. There are better ones, very few, but I can easily see this being the best episode of the entire show on many people's lists. So that one's definitely a standout piece of werewolf media to me. The second one would be an episode from Creepshow Season 1, the Shudder series, and that is Bad Wolf Down. Because to me, although there was parts of it that were pretty corny and schlocky, I do like the premise of the story, and I think it's very fun. It kind of reminds me of those early Pulp Fiction magazines, and kind of I picked up recently these Atlas era comics, which were early Marvel comics where they posted horror stories and sci-fi stories, and it has the feel of that, very old school, very sort of tacky, but I enjoy it. I think it's fun. I like the setting of it. I like the environment. And I actually do like the comic transformation scene. I think it was a clever way to handle the lower budget, and I think it's pretty cool to see it within the episode segment. As goofy as certain aspects can be, I think it's a fun one. And finally, the one I'm going to talk about is actually a story that I read recently that, funny enough, is going to turn into a one-shot comic, Creepshow one-shot comic, and that was Wolverton Station by Joe Hill. This story, to me, while it's definitely not the best in his collection Full Throttle, it has a really fun concept, and it is actually genuinely funny at certain points where basically this businessman who is very sort of socially unaware, he's very much embraced within his socioeconomic status. He likes being rich, he likes being successful, and talks down to a lot of people, is put into this alternate reality situation where as soon as he sits in this train and waits, in first class, a werewolf actually comes and sits next to him, and it's dressed up in human clothing, just as much as he would see any normal person out on the street. And as he starts investigating the train, he starts finding dead bodies and people torn apart, and realizes that the train may be infested full of werewolves who, for some reason, are dressed up as normal civilians, have their own culture. And when he progresses through the story, you find out another aspect of this world in London that may have been taken over by a certain creature. So it was very interesting, and I love the way that that idea was conceived, because apparently Joe Hill was actually in London, and he saw the name of a street kind of sound like Wolf in a way, and then he based the story off of that. So I thought it was interesting. And those are my three pieces of Wolf media. I enjoy them quite a bit, and especially Werewolf of Fever Swamps episode. You've
Great picks. To kind of piggyback on everyone, I love the Wolfman movie from like the original with Lon Chaney Jr. I love Fever Swamps episode. I love Werewolf Skin's book. It's my favorite Goosebumps book. It's one of my favorite werewolf tales of all time. I could easily mention those. But I want to bring up some that I feel like don't get enough attention. Like Twilight. I'm just kidding. One of my favorite fight movies ever. One of my favorite fight movies. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman or something like that. I think that's what it's called. What a fantastic movie. I don't think you have quite the acting balance there that you did with those earlier Universal Monsters movies. But man, this is like the birth of Freddy versus Jason. You know what I mean? Like this was like what the equivalent was back then. And for a black and white movie, I think shot in the late 50s, early 60s, somewhere in that time frame, had to be maybe the 40s sometime. It looked very well shot. I mean, they did a great job. If you I think we should probably have a watch party or something. I think that'd be a fun little thing to do or something one of these days. But love that. I love that film. Um, Another movie that I feel like doesn't get enough recognition, but it's not for everyone. Let me put that up there. Is Underworld: The Rise of the Lycans. I'm a massive Underworld fan. In that universe, you have vampires and lycans or werewolves coexisting, and that one is very werewolf focused. It does have a lot of CGI, but I dig the supernatural storytelling to it. So that's something else I love. Um, there's a character from Marvel Comics. There's actually two that I really love that are werewolves. Werewolf by Night. There's actually, I think, a short series on Disney Plus or something. I forget where it is, but that's really good. I've seen like one or two episodes. Really dig that. That's a very cool idea to werewolves. There's a villain that's associated with Spider-Man, I think, called Lunar Wolf or Man Wolf or something like that. Crazy character. It's like some cosmic werewolf character. Always love that. But yeah, there's just so much out there. Yeah, I mean, we've already talked about Silver Bullets movie, which I do think is better than the source material. It's up there with like Christine, in my opinion. I think from what I've read from Christine, I've read like 3 chapters and I put it down. I can already tell I like the movie way more. So yeah, sometimes King adaptations do translate better that way. But yeah, everybody had great picks. BD, do you want to close out to see if anything was mentioned by Dummies or Spongy on the topic before we close it?
Let me take a look.
I think we all have our favorite werewolf movies, but one thing we can all agree is the worst werewolf movie franchise is the Howling franchise. So
One of the worst films of all time is the 7th and final one, straight to VHS. Go watch New Moon Rising. I've seen better effects in the Goosebumps show from the 90s than in that 7th film in a long-standing franchise. That's depressing.
Sign me up.
You should watch it. It is nauseatingly boring. I'm telling you, you're gonna want to DNF it after the first 40 minutes.
It can't be worse than Creepshow 3.
Oh, Creepshow 3 is worse. It is worse, but I know you love torturing yourself by watching this kind of stuff. Just know that it's pretty awful.
You gotta
You can
watch
find it on
one. You
YouTube
gotta
for
watch
free.
1 through 6 first. The first one is pretty good, I guess, but then 2, and I'm on 4 and I can't get through it. It's that bad, and that's 4. Apparently, it gets worse as it goes on. Oh boy.
Did they have anything to say, BD?
They did not know. However, I
All
will
right.
join. I will join my fellow masochist brother Monster Blood. I will watch Howling series with you as well, so we can both suffer through that.
I mean, I've already seen it all the way through, but I'll watch it with you guys just to say I did.
I haven't watched any of them yet, but I am definitely down to watch through the franchise.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about going from the top of the mountain down, like Goosebumps and R.L. Stine werewolf stories. That's literally the film franchise of Howling. It's just constant down, and it doesn't stop.
Yeah. Once you guys get to part 3, once you guys finish part 3, tell me. I'll hop on the watch train with you guys for 4 through 7.
7 has never been released on DVD because it's so bad. You can find a rip of it on YouTube though for free. But that's a true story. The company that made it actually put out a thing saying they refuse to release it because it's that bad.
Which one is the one that JonTron roasted? I've seen clips of that one.
I think he roasted 6, but there's a 7th one.
Oof.
And the 7th one is the worst by far.
Brother.
And once you get done with 7, you're going to have a whole newfound appreciation for the 90s show when you see the effects and the acting. Good Lord. You're going to wish that you got however many minutes that movie is of your life back.
I can't wait.
Maybe we can start there and just climb up the mountain so we know what to appreciate when we get there. Maybe we can, start with the worst and work our way up. That'll be better.
For sure.
All right. Well, that was episode 10 of Goosejunkies. Thank you all for tuning in and staying as long as you did. Like I said in the beginning of the video, we're going to have everybody's information. If you want to follow us all, please, if you have time, go subscribe to our channels, drop a like on this video, give us feedback, let us know your thoughts on the topic, which ones you prefer and all that. We love to hear from you all. And for our next episode, just to give you a little tease, we have decided to do school auditorium horror, or more focused on plays, I should say. And we're going back to our typical Goosebumps versus Are You Afraid of the Dark face-off. We're going to be doing the Phantom of the Auditorium book and episode, facing off against Are You Afraid of the Dark's, I think it's season 6 or season 7's episode, The Tale of the Walking Shadow, which stars a young Jay Baruchel and Catherine Long from the Haunted Mask 2-part episode from the original show. So we cannot wait to discuss that. And then for our discussion, we have a little poster back here for the Phantom of the Auditorium play, and we're going to be, kind of talking about the play and our thoughts on the music and stuff like that. We think that'll be a fun discussion. So until next time, thank you all again, and stay safe out there and have fun goosebumping. See ya.